This is Land of Havilah, 1 Kings 10. Before Solomon was born, Yahweh sent word to his father David that he would have a son named Solomon, 1 Chronicles 22:9. So that's where the name came from Yahweh. Solomon means peaceful. But when Solomon was born, quote, Yahweh loved him, and he sent by the hand of Nathan the prophet, and he named him Jedediah for Yahweh's sake, 2 Samuel 12:24 and 25. Jedediah means loved by Yahweh. The scriptures mention that name only one time. But according to Solomon's two names, there would be peace during his days, 1 Chronicles 22:9, and Yahweh would love him. Then when Solomon became king and prayed for wisdom, Yahweh was pleased with that request, and he added wisdom to the peace and love, and also on top of that, riches and honor, 1 Kings chapter 3. Now in 1 Kings 10, we find out how all this is working out for Solomon. Verse 1, When the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning Yahweh's name, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great caravan, with camels that bore spices, very much gold and precious stones. And when she had come to Solomon, she talked with him about all that was in her heart. Solomon answered all her questions. There was not anything hidden from the king which he didn't tell her. When the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the sitting of his servants, the attendance of his officials, their clothing, his cupbearers, and his ascent by which he went up to Yahweh's house, there was no more spirit in her. She said to the king, It was a true report that I heard in my own land of your acts and of your wisdom. However, I didn't believe the words until I came and my eyes had seen it. Behold, not even half was told me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame which I heard. Happy are your men, happy are these your servants who stand continually before you, who hear your wisdom. Blessed is Yahweh your God, who delighted in you, to set you on the throne of Israel, because Yahweh loved Israel forever, therefore he made you king, to do justice and righteousness. She gave the king 120 talents of gold and a very great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again was there such an abundance of spices as these which the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Comment. So that was the testimony of the queen of Sheba. The location of Sheba is obscure, but it was to the south, Matthew 12:42. Speculation points us to the far side of Egypt or to the southern Arabian Peninsula. Certainly it was a very far distance because, though it was obviously a significant kingdom to produce such a queen, there's very little consideration of it in the Scripture, and Joel 3:8 flatly states that it was, quote, a faraway nation, end quote. And Jesus, in referring to this episode, also described the location of Sheba as being, quote, the ends of the earth, Matthew 12:42. So she came a long way, and according to verse 1, it was, quote, because of the fame of Solomon concerning Yahweh's name, and to test him with questions, quote, hard questions. She wanted some of life's answers, and she wanted them from Yahweh. She figured an audience with Solomon would be her best bet. And Solomon didn't disappoint. There seemed to be nothing beyond his grasp, quote, not anything hidden from the king, and, quote, not the half was told me, end quote. Amazingly, in terms of wisdom, God has promised us virtually the same thing in James 1:5, quote, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him, end quote. Liberally and without reproach is a lot of wisdom. She pointed out how happy Solomon's people must be to have such a wise king, and we can appreciate that today, that we would be happy to have wise political leadership. But can the people of our nations recognize wisdom when they see it, as did the Queen of Sheba? It seems the right calls the left blind, and the left calls the right blind. So there's one thing we agree on. Half of us are blind. God help us. By and large, the people of Jesus' time didn't appreciate his wisdom, which was greater than Solomon's, Matthew 12:42. So it's a pretty good guess that Jesus wouldn't get elected in our time any more than he was accepted in his own, though he performed many signs, quote, though he had done so many signs before them, yet they didn't believe in him, John 12:37. The Queen of Sheba was so impressed that, quote, there was no more spirit in her, end quote. But literally translated from the Hebrew, there was no more breath in her. She was breathless. In parting, she gave precious stones, a vast quantity of spices, and $288 million worth of gold at today's prices, which in effect was an offering to Yahweh. It was a validation of her own wisdom to seek Solomon out. Now on to other evidence that Yahweh fulfilled his promises to Solomon, verse 11. The fleet of Hiram that brought gold from Ophir also brought in from Ophir great quantities of almug trees and precious stones. The king made of the almug trees pillars for Yahweh's house and for the king's house, harps also, and stringed instruments for the singers. No such almug trees came or were seen to this day. Comment, Ophir is another faraway place, reachable for Solomon only because of Hiram's seagoing assistance. Again, the location is completely a mystery, other than it being far away and on or near a coast, but we do have one clue. It was attainable from the port that Solomon built at Ezion-Geber on the Gulf of Aqaba, 1 Kings 22:48. So it was somewhere on the seas to the south rather than on the Mediterranean. The point is that Solomon's kingdom was successful enough to reach heretofore unreachable places and to procure heretofore unattainable items such as were never seen after his day. So he was the most successful king in terms of trading and acquiring in all the history of ancient Israel. Now for one more verse about the Queen of Sheba, verse 13. King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatever she asked, in addition to that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. So she turned and went to her own land, she and her servants. Comment, Solomon gave gifts to her as well, all her desire, whatever she asked. Jesus, when commenting on the Queen of the South, the Queen of Sheba, didn't say exactly how she would come out in the judgment, but he certainly suggested she was on the right track. Quote, the Queen of the South will rise up in the judgment with the men of this generation, and will condemn them, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, one greater than Solomon is here. Luke 11:31. And there's another point with regard to Solomon. For all his glory, he couldn't match up with Jesus. Solomon's glories are a foreshadowing of the wisdom, riches, and glory of the kingdom of God, just a shadow of what's to come, and just a hint of how happy we, his servants, will be. Now on to other specifics of how Yahweh blessed Solomon, verse 14. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Comment, that's $1.6 billion in a year, verse 15. In addition to that which the traders brought, and the traffic of the merchants, and of all the kings of the mixed people, and of the governors of the country. Comment, kings of the mixed people has been translated Arabian kings. There was a booming commerce during Solomon's time. Coming up, Solomon had so much precious metal he created inventive ways to use it, verse 16. King Solomon made 200 bucklers of beaten gold. 600 shekels of gold went to one buckler. He made 300 shields of beaten gold. 3 minas of gold went to one shield, and the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Comment, a buckler is a small shield. He placed them in the house of the forest of Lebanon, which was his name for his palace in Jerusalem. The gold shields and bucklers wound up being looted just 1 generation later in King Rehoboam's time by Shishak, king of Egypt, along with most all of the other valuables that Solomon accumulated, 2 Chronicles 12:9, verse 18. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with the finest gold. Comment, ivory is rare and beautiful, but it's hard to know whether any of it was visible on the throne. It was at least partially overlaid with gold. Verse 19. There were 6 steps to the throne, and the top of the throne was round behind, and there were armrests on either side by the place of the seat, and 2 lions standing beside the armrests. 12 lions stood there on the one side and on the other of the 6 steps. Nothing like it was made in any kingdom. Comment, there were 6 steps up to the throne, and 14 lions, one on the right and left end of each step, and right and left of the throne. So we shouldn't visualize these as steps with a standard 10-inch tread. The treads had to be wide enough to accommodate lion statues. Verse 21. All King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, And all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver, because it was considered of little value in the days of Solomon. For the king had a fleet of Tarshish at sea with Hiram's fleet. Once every 3 years the fleet of Tarshish came, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Comment: Tarshish is another rich, faraway trading nation accessible by ship, but on the Mediterranean coast, Jonah 1:3. Verse 23, So King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. All the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. Comment: The Queen of Sheba was just one of the examples of the people that came to Solomon to hear his wisdom. All the earth sought the presence of Solomon. Wisdom is a valuable commodity, free to us for the asking. Verse 25, Year after year every man brought his tribute, vessels of silver, vessels of gold, clothing, armor, spices, horses, and mules. Comment: Tribute is Hebrew minkah, which is gift, tribute, or offering, some sort of voluntary thing, not extracted by force. It was just a matter of honoring Solomon and presenting something to him worthy of his status, and in many cases it seems a token of appreciation for being granted an audience. It would be rude to come to Solomon empty-handed. Verse 26, Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen that he kept in the chariot cities and with the king at Jerusalem. The king made silver as common as stones in Jerusalem, and cedars as common as the sycamore trees that are in the lowland. The horses which Solomon had were brought out of Egypt. The king's merchants received them in droves, each drove at a price. A chariot came up and went out of Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150 shekels, and so they exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and to the kings of Syria. Comment: At those prices Solomon could afford all the horses and chariots he wanted, which was incredible because even donkeys were a high luxury in former times, Judges 12:14. And in the early days, an enemy with a chariot was a fearsome sight, Deuteronomy 20, verse 1. Leviticus 26 laid out the blessings for keeping the commandments and curses for violating them, especially with regard to the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. Solomon is enjoying the blessings. 1 Kings 11 is next at landofhavilah.net, 1 Kings 11. This is the map of 1 Kings 10. Jerusalem is here. The Queen of Sheba was obviously from Sheba, which is an unknown location, speculated to be in Africa on the far side of Egypt or on the southern Arabian Peninsula. Tarshish is also a matter of pure speculation, but somewhere on the distant Mediterranean coast or on a Mediterranean island. Ophir is also obscure, but also reached only by sea, but from the port of Ezion-Geber on the Gulf of Aqaba, so Ophir would be somewhere near the coast of the Red Sea or Indian Ocean. 1 Kings 11 is next.